You go? Come on, just take. Bonjour, merci.
I'm back in my bag, yo. Conscious. ISO. Down back in my bag and I gotta brag, I do this shit for real. When we was down and we had nothing, we had to share a meal. We put the shit in overdrive with no steering wheel. Shorty throw that thing back in a pair of heels. Yeah, she be riding on that thing like a Ferris wheel. Yeah, I love them dark skin, brown skin, caramel. You know I had to bring it to the hood like she Karen Civil when she keep on turning head. Cause when she walk that thing jiggle, jiggle. And we going.
Yo! Nice.
It's so nice, man.
Yeah, it looks really nice, huh?
Yeah.
You know what's the funniest part about my Mac?
What?
Is that I bought it in Paris, right?
Yeah.
And the keyboard layout is all different. Like the A and W is not in the same place. So I'm gonna have to return it when I go back to Paris, and we'll just keep that one.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
It's so sick, bro.
It looks really nice.
Yeah, in person, it's so much nicer.
Alright, YouTube, I'm back, but I've got to set this one up. Funny enough, the day of the release, I had Jan film the unboxing for this video, mainly due to the fact that I was away when it came out. But look, all combined, I've spent about 20 hours with this hardware. I brought it in my car to take pictures, edited them. I've used it during my voiceovers, during shoot days, scripting, and transferring footage into it. It also overall has been a daily laptop to watch movies, answer emails, and so on. So I did buy one in France the morning of its release and traveled with it the last few days across France, Italy, and Switzerland. And I loved it. It's not perfect by any means, and it did cost performance compared to using it over my 14-inch MacBook Pro. Look, now that I've been back at the office and I've been using this as my daily, I am finally ready to talk a bit about my experience with it, some of the cons Apple has introduced into this laptop, and whether or not it's a MacBook I recommend. But let's get into the unboxing and the new hardware, shall we? Yeah, still a very standard Apple opening, although unlike last year's model, Apple now showcased the full side of the Air with its lid open. And quick disclaimer, I did get the base model for you guys. Opening this up, I did grab the new midnight version. It's just right over here, wrapped in this environmental friendly paper. Inside, well, yeah, this year we finally get a matching braided MagSafe cable depending on the colorway you got. I just find it funny how they still kept the USB-C part of it white. Next to it, everything else is quite the same. We get some documentation along a setup guide, but most importantly, some Apple stickers that will match the current colorway you got. Pretty cool. As for the charger, I kept it simple. Off the bat, the base model comes with a 30-watt charger that you can upgrade to a dual 35-watt charger or a 60-watt charger if you wish to do so. Now, as for the MacBook, in this paper, it's super easy to take off and makes the reveal super interesting. So yeah, midnight blue, a new colorway, looks really good in most lighting scenarios, however, not my first choice for a daily, and I'll explain later why. Regardless of that, I think it's time to talk about my experience with it, so welcome to my long-term review. Okay, so hardware-wise, this thing is not too bad. The thing I like to start off with is the color. watch out for this midnight blue. Not only it's a fingerprint magnet, but it is a coat, because underneath the laptop lives in a silver chassis. After connecting so many dongles to it, you can clearly see how the color peels when it often gets scratched, which is not so hard to do, so just be prudent. Plus the fingerprints are just unbearable to the point that I gave up on cleaning it. I mean, after my first day of use when I first came back from vacation, the trackpad looked like this. So I suggest you stick to a colorway like Starlight, which I very much enjoyed having, just like I very much enjoyed typing on this keyboard. Look, this new design got rid of the wedge shape, so no more taper edges and thin edges. Not that it was a big issue on the M1 Air, but these edges do dig less into your wrist. Apple did thin them all, which is super nice. However, I do miss the nice little incline the keyboard had because of its wedge shape, although I think I'd rather have this flat profile at 11mm all the way across. It's a very similar typing experience to what the MacBook Pro 14-inch delivers. My trip made me realize that, and I've been quite liking this on the Air instead. However, this new keyboard is by no means perfect. It's the same old magic keyboard the M1 Air had with a new fingerprint sensor, but turns out that because of their new flat profile, the keys have less travel. Less travel compared to what the M1 MacBook Air had, and yes, without knowing, I did realize this the minute I used it. It's not my cup of tea, but my fingers did not seem to mind all that much. On the other hand, the MacBook Pro 14-inch trackpad compared to this also has more of a clicky feel to it. So I guess those are not the same. What they do have in common though is this new 1080p camera finally living on the notch. Camera looks better than what the M1 Air had, plus this time around the mics do sound quieter and a bit muted, which I think is a plus because a lot of laptop cameras tend to have these super high pitch mics. While FaceTiming with Jan on a few occasions, he did mention the camera looked a bit desaturated, but I think that for someone that will use this as their everyday laptop, at work or at home, the camera will definitely be an upgrade. I'm happy with this 1080p camera, plus it has a portrait mode, although center stage could have been awesome, and so all of this does live on a brighter display at 500 nits with new slim bezels and a bigger screen. And yes, it makes a difference. I personally found that it does feel nice having that extra 0.3 inches diagonally, mostly when coding or editing pictures on Lightroom. Working inside in bright spaces is extremely doable as the screen is bright enough, and even outside when the sun is extremely harsh, the display is very well exposed. Cameras suck at picking up all of the different levels of brightness, but trust me, the screen really does deliver, and it's great for working outdoors. Now, closing this thing up, the hinges feel perfectly fine, and if I was to compare the overall chassis with the MacBook Pro 14-inch, it is quite smaller. It's definitely impressive considering this here is 13.6 inches and the MacBook Pro is 14.2 inches. I must say, unlike the midnight blue, while traveling with the Starlight color, I wasn't worried about getting it scratched. I mean, I had it in the back of our car and it was completely fine at all times. The M2 chassis does feel a lot sturdier than the M1 in my opinion, and so it's nice knowing that for what you pay, you don't really have to worry about throwing it around. So yeah, the chassis is perfect and not perfect as we are still missing that SD card slot and the color can be a bit worrisome. However, Satechi, the sponsor of this video, has us covered for that. Satechi is a company that I've been working with ever since I started creating content. They usually send me goodies to make my MacBook experience a lot more flawless. They are a company that brings productivity to Mac products in style, whether you are looking for a proper sleeve to fit your new MacBook, a perfect compact USB-C PD GAN power charger, awesome peripherals, or even a proper vertical stand, they've got you covered. The great thing with Satechi is that you no longer need to worry about your dual display connectivity with their hubs. Their USB-C multi-port MX supports dual external displays as long as you install their Silicon Motion software for both HDMI ports to function. It's actually very neat and works well. Awesome enough, guys, it is a company that very much sells their products at Apple stores. Their products can be found in more than 10,000 stores across the globe, but if you'd like to save yourself a trip, you can use the links in the description to get your MacBook accessories at your doorstep. Now, if you do decide to use use a charger above 65 watts, you'll get to benefit from faster charging, which is interesting because the Air I had in Europe completely died on us when we most needed it. However, because I brought a bigger charger with me, it literally took like 33 minutes to get it up to 50%. Plus, the amazing part about MagSafe is that not only it now has a better magnet compared to the 14-inch Pro, but MagSafe also frees up one USB-C port to have available for more dongles and accessories. Unless you are using Bluetooth, which I'm kind of bummed out about it with this laptop. It only uses Bluetooth 5.0, a bit weird since we all know Bluetooth 5.2 is more power efficient, which Apple preaches, and has better transmission stability. With a few peripherals connected, let me tell you, you'll definitely wish you had more stability. Last thing I like to touch upon, which I realized when watching Netflix before bed, are the speakers. There's clearly no more grills, and so the sound now bounces off the display through some of the vents that live under the hinge. This results in the volume not being that good. I know there are two woofers in here, but I did not feel like they actually existed. It's definitely not as punchy as the M1 MacBook Air. In fact, it feels like the mids are better, but the highs lack along with the bass. Hear this out. Okay, performance wise, the laptop is not perfect. You know, this is very much a laptop for your average consumer, a laptop that can sustain 20 Chrome tabs, basic Excel use, web development, Netflix, and whatnot. And this is where these batteries truly shine. On Sunday, I did my last battery life test and we started using it at around 91%. I scripted this video, watched some Netflix while eating, and even watched some YouTube videos, all considering I had Discord open, Lightroom in the background, Notion, and a bunch of Chrome tabs open. At around 10 p.m, the battery was at 50%. I get a solid 8 to 10 hours a day of use depending on what I'm doing. In Europe, however, it was a bit different since I was pushing this laptop a lot more. With video editing, photo editing, and using Google Maps on the go, I was hovering around 5 hours a day. Pushing the laptop this much though did make me realize how much hotter it gets compared to the M1, to the point that you really feel the heat on your legs. With this sustained workload, this laptop gets hot without a fan and it causes it to throttle. For me, I realized that the sweet point before throttling was between 3 to 5 minutes of heavy use, and I pretty much realized this when editing the entire intro of this video when I was away on vacation. So I would get great performance when the laptop was at a cool 45 degrees. As soon as I started pushing it, the temps went up and it thermal throttled. Even when I was editing the Porsche pictures in the car, after 5 minutes of editing, the performance was poor. I did some research on this and turns out that iFixit had found that the new Air doesn't even have a proper heatsink. First, it has this little thermal pad on the top of the motherboard, and instead, it has this thin metal shielding that is supposed to dissipate heat, which is overall very different from their last model, which has a proper heatsink. However, there seems to be a fix for that because I googled it, although not sure how this will affect long-term usage. The good news is that it is a $15 mod and it won't void your warranty. Max from MaxTech claims that you indeed gain 15 minutes of max performance before throttling. Before doing that research, I really thought my performance issues were SSD related, which I'm sure the memory affects. As we all know by now, Apple only used a single 9 chip for their memory modules. As a result, we get very slow speeds in terms of reading and writing, way lower than what the M1 MacBook Air yields. Let's also not forget that with the M2, we get a shared memory access pool, where in that pool lives the SSD, so when the 8GB of RAM gets filled up, the SSD will give some of its gigabytes away to RAM. However, now that the SSDs are slow, this will overall affect your multitasking performance. I guess it could explain as to why Clean My Mac keeps giving me RAM warnings. Look, this laptop is great for everyday use. My video editing experience and photo editing experience haven't been the best, although I must remind you all that I am shooting with an A7S Mark III using very heavy files with huge codecs, and so it's normal. Things will lag on the timeline when working on Premiere, and my LUTs sometimes take forever to apply on Lightroom when editing a picture. But I must remind you all that it is a laptop that very much is built for the average consumer. It's so great at doing internet browsing, editing simple footage on Final Cut Pro, doing Excel work, web development, and whatnot. I also don't want to neglect the fact that compared to the M1 Air, M2 really did improve its performance. It literally shows in every single test every YouTuber has ran up to now. And yes, this also includes our tests with M2 crushing it. But for the price, it's a bit awkward, I must say. I feel like the M1 Air raised the bar so high for laptops nowadays that it's almost unbeatable. In this market, you can easily find an M1 MacBook Air used for half the price of the new M2. However, you will be losing on the new design features and the new performance this delivers, but the Air is just overall a great laptop for everyday use, and the M1 did it perfectly too. Look, if you are really on a tight budget, I most certainly recommend looking at the used market for an M1 Air. If you are not and you come from maybe an Intel MacBook Air, I suggest you check this out. Do not try to upgrade this with more SSD and RAM, because even though it will yield better performance, you're getting closer to the MacBook Pro 14-inch, which will just destroy this in every single way. Get the base model, enjoy it, and have fun with it. This is a laptop I love for web developers, and my review for programmers is coming out next week. I hope this video helps you with your purchasing decision. I'm signing out. Peace.